While there are a lot of real estate coaches and gurus out there sharing their ideal real estate routines, like how much time we should spend prospecting and how much time we should spend previewing inventory, so on and so forth, how much time we should spend door knocking, there's not as many sharing what I would consider really effective, good personal routines. By personal routine, I mean we're talking about non-professional habits and practices that fuel our professional routines. In this episode, we're going to get into those individual routines in hopes of inspiring conversation about your personal routine. So, Gary, let's dive in.
Let's get personal. Hey, and thank you so much for joining us today at the Chris and Garry Show. My name is Garry Creath, and I'm joined here by my fearless business partner, Chris Scott. And you know what? We are here to talk all things real estate, and we feel like we have something to provide around this situation and this subject because combined, we've been in the real estate industry for over 50 years. And here at the Chris and Garry Show, we talk all things real estate. Now, today, we're going to deviate from that just a little bit, and we hope you enjoy it. Make sure as we get started that you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you get notifications. And if you want to take this a little bit further, make sure that you find us on all the different channels at The Paperless Agent.
Gary, I think the best way to do this is to break our personal routines into like different categories. And
I think 5. Let's do 5.
Let's do 5. Good news is I was thinking we would have 5. I think spiritual development is one of those things that oftentimes gets overlooked, particularly because people don't want to talk about religion and all that kind of stuff. However, developing in that area of spiritual development, I think, is a really important one. But so are our relationships that we have. This could be personal relationships, professional relationships, but how we work with our relationships also has a tremendous influence on whether we have a good day or bad day. I think health and wellness is a great category because of longevity, and having energy, which actually is a different section of time and energy management, I think is a big one. And then personal finance. So those are the 5 categories of personal routine I think we should get into. And I think the best way to start is I'll ask you and then you ask me, and we'll just kind of riff going back and forth on what are the things that you do. I will say this for myself, my routines change almost with every season. So as much as I would love to have a set routine that I follow every day, the fact is I have 4 kids who are still in school, right? And the older they get, the more demanding the time gets placed, right? So I have 3 kids in marching band in high school. That changes my entire day and my schedule. I don't have like a set routine, but I have a whole bunch of practices and I work to fit them in throughout the day. So
well, I think that's a really good point. And it's not just about kids and seasonality, et cetera. It's also about giving yourself grace and not saying, I have to be so rigid about these things, because I know about myself is that if there's that rigidity in practice, it makes me want to combat it and fight it and not do it. And you have to be fluid. You have to be able to say, oh, you know what? I was doing these things. I don't want to do that anymore. I'm going to do something different. Mm-hmm. Or the timeline, I don't want to do it first thing in the morning anymore. I'm going to do it after lunch, whatever it may be. But it's very important to start somewhere and then gradually build up. This is another thing I would highly recommend is if you don't have any personal practices around these things right now, but you want to start somewhere, but don't try and go from 0 to 90, because what I know is that like if you say, I'm going to do all of these things all at once, what's going to happen is you're not going to do any of them. I'll share that in health and wellness in just a minute of some practices that I've changed, but I've decided not to go like full throttle because I know I won't maintain.
You were talking about health and wellness. Let's start there, right? I have a bunch of them. You have a bunch of them. What are some of your health and wellness personal routines that you like to use? And expand on that thing where you're just about to say about, you have to be fluid and otherwise it's not going to work for you.
Well, for me, there's nothing more important to my health and wellness than sleep. Nothing. I listen to people saying, I sleep 4 hours a day. And I'm like, I pity the fool.
I can't function. 4 hours. 4 hours, I'm hurting.
Well, there's so much science behind how, sleep is more important than exercise. And so if we're not actually regenerating and giving our bodies the rest, it's not going to work. So for me, I go to bed and I'm in bed between 9 and 10 every night. Doesn't matter. I'll read a little bit, whatever it may be. I'm not watching, definitely don't have a TV in the bedroom. My wife and I will get in bed, we'll read a little bit, go to sleep, and I don't have an alarm. I don't set an alarm. Don't want an alarm.
Well, you probably don't need one if you're going to bed at 9, 10 o'clock. You're automatically going to probably wake up 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning.
And what happens is my body will wake up when it's done. Right? It's like, okay, we've regenerated. We're good. We're rested. And so I wake up. Then after that, having some sort of practice around exercise and getting natural light. That's another thing that is really important to me. Getting natural light first thing in the morning to reset that circadian rhythm, right? So it's like, bam. And I travel a lot. So natural light is very, very important to my body to get over jet lag, etc. So first thing in the morning, I'll get up. My wife and I will have a coffee, small breakfast, and we're instantly out the door, going for a walk, walking the dogs, getting natural light, getting into nature. That's a big practice for us. So we're doing that every single day, unless it's pouring rain. I was talking about getting back into practices. Well, we've moved to a new neighborhood. And so I decided, it's time to join a gym. And my best practice historically in going to a gym is I would go 5 days a week. Well, I know I haven't been going 5 days a week. I haven't been going to the gym. And so for me to say, you know what, I'm going 5 days a week right out the gate, my body's...
That's pretty rough. I'll tell you what, you can't start there, right? You can't start where you left off. If you've taken a break or you fell off the wagon, you can't start where you fell off. That's how injuries take place. I mean, I can speak to injuries because I'm that way where let's say, because I work out probably almost every day of the week now. I did not start there. A couple of years ago, I got serious about exercise, and my exercising these days is pretty insane. I'm up to almost about 2 hours a day spread throughout the day.
But hold on, Chris, if you started there, number one, your body would have broken down instantly. You would have injured yourself.
Yes.
It's not, it's just
and
not
I
smart.
I have even, that's the thing is that you overtrain. And I do a lot of different exercise vehicles for exercise, but I know that you have to listen to your body, and your body is going to speak to you through things like being tired, like being hungry, like pain, right? And so when your body's speaking to you, I have learned the older that I've gotten to listen to it. And when I don't, it's always injury. I'll give you a great example. A few months ago, one of the activities I like to do is karate sparring, basically combat fighting, right? And I was sparring. I had been sparring for about an hour, and I was tired. I was gassed out. Like it was probably 8 or 9 o'clock at night, and I was tired. And I'm a little bit older than most of the people I'm sparring with by a good 10 years. Okay. So I'm keeping up with people in their 30s. And so I'm tired. I decided I was going to go one more round with a black belt. I was like, and I'm not a black belt. So I was like, I'm going to go one more round before I call this a day. And you know what happened? Broken rib. You know why? Because I was too tired to defend myself. And I knew I was too tired. I don't know why, but it's because I wanted to get right back in there, And of course, what happens? Injury, broken rib, takes 2 months to rehab. And so you really do have to.
I mean, after 2 months of not working out, you have to hit the reset button.
Yes. You got to start all over again. And then you're feeling like, oh, this is a huge setback. One of the big things, I don't know about for you, this is something, because you and I are about the same age, something that has become increasingly important to me in the area of health and wellness is actually mobility.
Yes.
And that's like something as simple as being able to stand up and sit down quickly, being able to crouch on the ground on your knees, like just mobility, being able to move. And what I've noticed is that those are not the exercises that I learned how to do. Mobility exercises, things like stretching, things like stretching your hip flexors, all these things I didn't even know about, right? And I've been working out for a while. But as I've gotten older, those things become more important because I realize I want to keep up with my children. As they get older and want to do stuff, I want to be able to keep up with them. I could tell as I have been getting older, I had been doing less and less, even though I was working out. Like I was in good shape, but I wasn't in good shape from a mobility perspective. And so that's something that I worked on a lot in the last year or so. And the crazy thing, it's one of the easiest things to do. Right, like to work on, you can literally work on mobility sitting in a chair at your desk, just lifting your knees up and doing high knees. But most people don't
You
realize
know
that.
what, Chris? Here's the thing. As a real estate agent, you know the best practice for mobility?
Walk in the neighborhood.
Touring properties.
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing. You're driving from one place to the next. You don't even think about it, but getting in and out of your car all day long, that's the same like you were talking about, mobility, sitting, squatting, standing. It's exercise. Walking all of these houses, touring. I mean, heck, get an Apple Watch and just count the steps that you're walking when you go on property tours. So like it's not, for me, it's not something that is a sole kind of practice, is like, if I'm going to exercise, I'm just going to the gym. No, if I'm going to exercise, I go to the gym and I'm taking care of other domains of concern. For example, spiritual development. I may be listening to some spiritual podcast while I'm exercising with a friend.
Right.
So all of a sudden I've got spiritual development, relationships, and health and wellness all taken care of in one event. And so I think it's really important not to say, well, this is for this and this is no.
I love that.
Things can I combine?
You're being strategic about taking care of these really important areas. Actually, I thought that because we actually have a very similar practice, which you go for a walk in the morning for most mornings with your spouse. I do the same thing. I didn't know you did that, but I do the same thing. One of the first things my wife and I do is, well, after we get up, is we have 2 dogs. We take the dogs for a walk. We walk for about a mile. And what are we doing? Well, I'm usually using that as a nice warm up to an exercise, but what are we doing? We're able to connect. We're able to talk. We're able to talk about the day's events that are going to go on, or maybe recap on things we didn't get to the day before. And so all of a sudden, that idea of blending these areas so that you can be taking care of personal routines, but not making it to where you're so, like you said, rigid. Oh, this is my spiritual development. Oh, this is my exercise or health and wellness. And oh, this is my eating. These things can work together. Like you can eat healthy and go out to lunch with somebody that you care about at the same time. It's like,
let's talk about that. Let's talk about consumption. What are we consuming? Because, there's this whole, I don't know where the heck this movement came from, is that eat super, super healthy all week and then have a cheat day.
I think that's from the old Bill Phillips Body for Life stuff back in the day.
For me, that's the worst idea ever. Is like I do really well all week and then I ruin the entire week with one cheat day. No, it's like, for me, food quality is super, super important. Making sure that I'm eating healthy, but not too extreme. And making sure that I'm not eating unhealthy to an extreme. So I like moderation for me when I'm talking about health, wellness is really, really important. I'm not going to go to the gym for 4 hours a day. Why? I'm not a professional bodybuilder. It's not what I do. By the way, it's not what I enjoy. The only reason I go to the gym is I need some strength training, but it also gives me time to catch up on podcasts or listen to music or, whatever that may be. For me, it's about moderation. Chris, I know, you're a cook. You love to cook.
I do.
Chris, if you guys don't know this, was actually a cook in the military eons ago.
I even cooked in a Japanese restaurant back that's how I learned how to cook as a teenager.
Chris is big in Japan. Chris was actually in a commercial in Japan
as a child. Yes, it explains a lot about me. Just kidding.
But food is very important to you and your family as well. So let's talk a little bit about that.
I have 4 kids, right? 3 in high school and 1 at the end, on the tail end of elementary school, and so they're younger. And so that plays into a little bit about the food issues, right? So kids, they're not going to eat as healthy as I need to eat in order to, as healthy as my wife and I want to eat. The kids aren't going to eat it. It's just not going to happen. But I'm also not about to make 2-3 dinners or 2-3 meals for every meal. So what I've done and what we've realized is the more you can make, let's say 60 to 80% of your day be, hey, this is like my meal plan. So for example, for breakfast, I have the same thing for breakfast every day, and it's a protein shake, okay? For lunch, I have pretty much the same lunch every day. It's a salmon patty that I get from H-E-B with some rice and cabbage, right? So I know breakfast and then maybe a snack and lunch, it's the same thing every single day. And so I know the calorie count with that. I know the macros around that, and it's giving me what I need. But if I were to stay so rigid and just eat like that all the time, I would go crazy and I would get tired of those foods. So with dinner is usually where I'll insert variety. So I eat super clean all day. Not that I can go out and run a Big Mac, but so I can have, let's say, pasta, right? So pasta is not something I would normally have eaten in the past. Well, now if I eat clean all day, I can have a bowl of pasta, and it's still within my calorie count, macro count, so on and so forth. But what's most important is it's still healthy and there's variety. So I try to balance, or not, it's not even really balance. I try to be fluid with blending together. Okay, I'm going to have a routine. I'm going to be a little bit more rigid here, right, for a part of the day. And then as the day goes on, and I know my willpower starts to fall off later in the day, as everybody's does, right? The more decisions and choices you have to make, the more your willpower starts to decline. So by the end of the day at dinner, am I really feeling like eating that, 6-ounce filet of tilapia that's been cooked in the oven instead of fried? No, I don't feel like making that choice. So I just eat whatever the kids are eating, and it's fine. Like it works out okay. But I do find, like, I love that fluid, like being fluid with these things, not being so rigid, but just having a really good plan and then really focusing on, oh, I don't need to lose weight. I just need to be healthy, right? I don't need to be Arnold Schwarzenegger in the gym. I just want to be like strong and have good mobility. And that really switches and changes things so that I can be flexible.
Well, and I think tying it to your goals, this is what's really important to me. The why is important, and you have a very, very clear why as to what you're doing with your body and your exercise. I mean, you and your entire family are in karate together. So it's like, it's a family experience. That's like relationship. It's family, but it's exercise and well-being. Yes. And there's actually a spiritual part of that if you add that in there. But it's about the why. The why is, I'm going to spend time with my family, and I'm going to do these exercises so that as I age, I can still do the things I want to do with my kids and eventually their kids, right? So that's exactly why.
You mentioned the karate and the kids. I would have never done karate had my kids not wanted to do it, right? Like, that was not my game plan as, someone in my late 40s to start doing karate in my late 40s. But I got a really good piece of advice from somebody, and he said, follow your kids' interests. If you like football, don't make your kid play football, right? If your kid likes to play football, then play football. But if you like it and they don't make them play. So in this case, it was one of those things where I didn't want to do karate. I didn't even want to have to take my kids to karate, but my sons were adamant about it. They were like, we want to do karate. We want to do karate. So I took them and I was watching them. And next thing you know, I'm there doing it because it would look fun. I was like, that looks kind of fun. I'm going to try that out. So I started doing it. It actually started because I was just trying to justify a second workout in the day, a cardio workout, right? Next thing you know, my wife joins, my 2 daughters join, the whole family's doing it now. And it's like, and we have a good time. Yes. Now, is it hard? Yes. But we're learning together, and it's been a really cool experience. But again, it's working on relationships. It's working on the spiritual aspect. It's helping health and wellness. And so there's so much to just that one experience where it's covering just by following my kids' interests.
I do like the idea of start with your why. My why, I've had 5 or 6 knee surgeries on my left knee, and the doctors are like, you'll never snow ski again. And so my big why is getting my body back to a place where I can ski safely. And so, it's like these whys of what we love to do, and making sure that we maintain our bodies so that we can do it safely.
I have set like sort of bigger objectives that then force me to get into that shape, which is exactly what you're doing. I want to ski again, and I want to ski safely. Well, that's a great objective because now you can muster all of the discipline that's needed because you have a strong why behind what you're trying to do. It's not just like, oh, I want 6-pack abs for the people will say, oh, you look great.
What?
Yeah.
What's
like there's
why.
Now, you might say, I want to be really strong, X, Y, Z. And in the process, you'll probably get 6-pack abs doing all those deadlifts and all that kind of stuff. But again, that wasn't the main objective. There was a bigger why.
Right. When you're talking about practices, what absolutely has to come into play is your calendar and time blocking. And, when are you doing these things? Chris, you talk a lot about spiritual development. When do you make time for this? Like, so let's talk about that. What are you doing for your spirituality?
Yes.
And when? Like where do you cram this in when you've got a big family? We own a company,
Multiple
we operate a
businesses.
company
Yeah.
together. You've got a lot going on. When
When
what
do
do
you
you
do
do
this?
and when do you do it?
So one of the things that I've learned over the years, and I forget who I
Which,
learned
by
this
the way,
from.
everybody, I'm looking at his calendar right now, so I'm going to hold him accountable. If he misses something, I'm going to say, "Oh, no."
Here's the thing. What I've learned is that it was more important for me to manage my energy than it is to manage my time. I'm going to say that again. It's more important for me to manage my energy than to manage my time, because a lot of the work that we end up doing is like creative work, right? I got to think about what we're going to say. I got to think about the marketing that we're going to do. Got to think about how we're going to solve problems for our clients and customers. That is creative work. Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not painting a picture. It's still creative work. And I have learned that in order to be a good creative or a good creative person to come up with creative solutions, I need to be in the right mind space, which means I need to be decompressed. I can't have a feeling of a bunch of stuff coming at me. And so how do I manage my energy? So, and then how does this blend into the calendar? So I know that if I have to be creative, the only way I can force myself to be creative is immediately after expending all my physical energy. So I'm at my peak creativity immediately after a workout, right? So if I go hit, and it doesn't matter what kind of workout, it could be going some cardio, it could be boxing on a bag, it could be strength training, it could be doing karate, it could be whatever, going for a walk even. But if I can go and break a sweat after I do that, for whatever reason, my mind is clear, okay, and I can be creative. Now, it doesn't last forever. It might last for an hour or 2 hours at the most, sometimes only 20 minutes. But I know that I can force creativity by doing something physical. It's like doing something physical can re-energize emotionally and mentally to be able to do that creative work. So to do the spiritual development, right, that is going to be, for me, that's going to be things like reading spiritual books, journaling, prayer and meditation. Journaling is a big one for me because I have a hard time like meditating or praying because I get distracted too easily. I could sit down and pray or meditate and be like, squirrel.
Well, especially with 4 kiddos.
Yes. So I
there's
journal.
a lot of noise.
The act of journaling forces me to have pen in hand, paper, and looking in concentrated effort. And so what I do is so from an energy management perspective, I know what I need to do to be able to be creative or to do the types of work that I need to be able to do. So for example, I can't do meetings. You're not going to be as good at meeting with a customer or people if you're emotionally drained. All right. So I go for a walk for 5 minutes. I can go for a quick run. Now I'm clear. Now I can take care of this for my clients. And so what I do is when I schedule my day, and I do it, I am calendaring multiple times a day, meaning that I go to my calendar morning, afternoon, and evening throughout the day constantly. And I'm not just looking at what am I doing next. I'm looking at what will I be doing today, tomorrow, and the week after, and the month after. And so as I look into the calendar, I can tell already like when I'm going to need to make modifications because I have to be fluid, to your point. We all have to be fluid. Who knows when you're going to get that call and need to hop on a listing appointment. So you need to have that fluidity. So what I do is I start to look in, I constantly set my intention for my time. I set intentions for how I'm going to spend my time. Doesn't always work out that way. I set the intention of how I want to spend my time throughout the entire day. And then that builds on through the entire week. And you can see like Gary can go to my calendar, like this is everything that Chris has going on. This is when he's going to be working on this presentation. This is when he's going to go film this listing video over for 818 Mariner. This is when he's going to do this. So Gary can see when I'm doing stuff, but then he can also see, oh, here's when he intends to work on this. I wonder if he's going to work on that. Here's when he intends to do X, Y, Z, and it may or may not happen based on the energy level that I have. If I manage my energy, I'm not tired at 3 o'clock. Or if I am, I'll say, I'm going to take a nap for 12 minutes. I will, from time to time, take a 12-minute nap in the middle of the day. And that, again, that's another way to re-energize. Sometimes it's not always working out. Sometimes if my head can't think clearly, it means that I'm tired and I need a little nap. And I will literally take a 12-minute nap in the middle of the day, which seems crazy. But what that'll do is that will buy me, like, let's say I take that nap around 3 or 4 o'clock. I will have a heightened energy level until around 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. So I can extend, and I got to get up pretty early to get the kids to school, right? So I'm up at 6:30 in the morning, and that's when my day starts. But it doesn't end until around 10, 11 o'clock, because also I might have to go run and pick up the kids after a football game at 11:30 at night, like I will tonight. So how do I manage that? The time doesn't matter. It's what can I do with that time? That comes down to energy. There's a book called The Power of Full Engagement by Tony Schwartz and somebody else. I forget who the author was. They were featured in the Harvard Business Review like decades ago. But the idea that they were sharing was really interesting. They talk a little bit about how to achieve flow in life. And so much of it was managing energy, managing your personal routines. And so that really stuck with me. And I'm glad I remembered the book, because that was like where for me it all started a long time ago. And I'm still a work in progress like everybody else is, right? But that's, for me, it's more important to manage my energy, which allows me and then to be fluid with my calendar. And then I find the pockets of time. Because usually people think of their calendaring as, oh, well, I got to fit this in here and fit this here and fit this here. But the quality of that work is dependent on the quality of the energy that you have. So if I schedule time out to journal, but if I'm not feeling it, I can't willpower my way through a creative journal exercise.
Yeah, you can't force that.
You can't force creativity. So what's better? Well, if it's at 4 o'clock and the kids aren't home, and I said I had journal down as my intention, I'm going to take that 12-minute nap. Then I can write that journal.
Yeah.
And so
I like that. It's the fluidity of all of that. Is things are not rigid. It doesn't happen this way every single day. For me, when I start looking at, I love how you talk about energy management, because I think especially in real estate, it's important to manage our energy, because it's very easy for us to give our energy away and not protect our own energy, which means that we have to generate more energy as real estate professionals than most people. We're serving our clients. We're out and about all the time. And so managing that energy by making sure that we don't overcommit, but also in energy management for me, Chris, is if I start my day out correctly, I know my energy is going to be managed the entire day. If I start my day out poorly and I start reacting to things, it's going to go bad really quickly.
Give me some examples. What are some examples of that?
So first thing, I talked about, we get up, we have coffee. I have coffee with my wife every morning, and then we go for a walk. After the walk, we come back home and I start my spiritual practice. This is where I will read a spiritual book. This is where I will journal. This is my gratitude journal right here. So I have a journal. I have 2 journals. One is just for gratitude, and I start my day in an attitude of gratitude. And I know that my wife can tell when I have not done my gratitudes, because she's like, why did you cut that guy off in traffic? Why are you yelling?
Why are you being such a jerk, Gary?
Why did you fire the landscaper today? But it's also, it's about that energy management, but it's also about that spirituality. So spirituality for me is very different for you than it is for you. But we both have the similar practices. I journal, I meditate. In fact, I studied transcendental meditation many, many years ago. And in transcendental meditation, what you do is you meditate twice a day for 20 minutes. What I can tell you is I'm not a great TM follower, because I can't do 20 minutes, because I don't, my brain is, I can quiet my brain for 10 minutes. After that, I'm fine. I'm going to journal. I'm going to make sure that I document what's going on in my head. I'll meditate morning and evening, which, by the way, manages energy. And I know if I'm having a bad day and I just need to calm down, you may take a nap, I meditate. And that re-energizes me. So it restarts everything for me. So that's really important to me, making sure that I'm reading and learning. I journal in 2 different journals, and I meditate.
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't, when you mentioned how you start your day off with gratitude, it made me realize I have a very similar practice, but it's in the evening. So this is relatively new for me, and it started maybe about 6 months ago. And so what I noticed is my routine for going to bed usually involved scrolling through social media before I went to sleep, right? But I realized though, scrolling through social media or reading the news, I noticed I would feel upset. I would feel like angry or like the world was going to crap, and I would just not feel good before going to bed. And I didn't like that feeling. So instead, what I started doing is I started scrolling through photos on my app, my Photos app on my phone.
Oh, that's awesome.
And what started happening was, instead of reading the news and thinking about how everything's going crappy, is I go scroll through my photos and I'm looking at all the great times that we're having, right? I just like, it's amazing how many, I scroll through the photos. I'm like, I forgot we did that. I forgot we did that yesterday. You know what I mean? Like, there's so many good things that happen in a day, in a week, in a month, in a year. And a lot of them are just like little photos that got picked up here or there. It might be a photo of a belt test where we got our test. It might be a photo from the kids' band competition, or maybe from a vacation, or maybe just taking the dog for a walk and the dog said something funny and we took a photo of it. Like, all of that sparks for me the gratitude so that I can end my day with positive feelings and thoughts.
Man, you want to talk about like the most incredible dopamine hit. Like, you're not doing drugs. What you're doing is you're looking at photos and you get that dopamine hit right there. That is such a great idea. One thing you and I talked about is under relationships, which I found really interesting, is that you're sending pictures to your parents every single week, right? Like family photos or whatever. What is that about?
So going back to the social media issue, what I realize is social media has this really divisive component to it. And I'm the kind of person who goes down the rabbit trails, right? Maybe it's a little ADHD. I don't know what it is. But if I'm on social media, I'm not like focused on what the intent behind it, which is connecting with people and stuff like that. For whatever reason, I start reading articles, and next thing you know, I feel bad from reading social media because, you're just not, there's a lot of negative stuff out there, right? And so what I realized is I wasn't updating my parents on what was going on in our life, because my parents don't live in Austin. They're in San Diego. And, we moved here, 13 years ago or something like that. So anyway, I realized and I started fasting from social media probably around the beginning of the pandemic is when I started. So a few years ago. And so I wasn't posting, so I wasn't sharing, I wasn't updating my parents. And so like when we visit or when I talk to them, and I usually talk to them like once, twice a month, they were always like, "Oh, I didn't know that happened," or "What happened?" Or they would have to go to my wife's social media account because she does post more frequently or more regularly than I do. So I realized, why wait for that? Why, as the things are happening, I can fire off an image, fire off a pic from a recent happening, and then they feel connected to what's going on. But then what it leads to is more interaction with the people that I care about. Recent one, I took a picture. The kids were at the dojo, and I forget what happened, but they were joking around doing tornado kicks at the dojo. So I filmed one. I filmed it in slow motion of my son doing a tornado kick, which he's a very talented martial artist. He's a 540 tornado kick, means he's spinning around multiple times in the air, landing a kick. So I took that in slow mo. I sent it to my parents, and they were like, "That's awesome!" All of a sudden, we got into it, and they would have not otherwise not seen that. We've not been able to talk about it, and it's
Which
a way
means they don't feel connected to the family. They're not involved in the whole growth of these kids. But now, just by sending a photo or a video.
Yeah. And so I've even extended that with my kids, because the younger generations, they're like, you can either, what is that saying? You can either, if you can't beat them, join them type thing.
Yep. Yeah.
So like, there's a lot of parents who are always really bad. Like, they're like, "Oh, you don't let your kids on social media. Don't let your kids on the phone." And we've been very slow in giving our kids access to everything, probably more slow than most people. But the fact is, like, you can't really get mad at your kids if they're spending time on this device. That is how their primary means of communication just is.
Sure. Yeah.
And so rather than fight it, it's like, I have great conversations with my kids in a group chats now, because we joke around. They'll update me of what's going on minute by minute, pretty much, of what's going on in school. They'll send me photos. They'll send me short videos. Same thing. I'll send stuff back. If I was in the office earlier, I took a selfie of me in the office doing a webinar, and I shared that with them. And, they made jokes about how my hair looked at that time. And so it was like, it's just all this rich engagement. And yet, most of the time you'll hear parents lamenting about how their kids spend all this time in here. Well, why don't you log in there and connect with them on that thing? Because that's all they're doing. Literally, I have literally watched my twins. So they're 14. I have literally seen them sit on the couch, one send a text to the other and the other one laugh. They could have totally done that verbally. Instead, they were sitting there. And why didn't they do it in person? Because they were sharing a meme. That's why. It was a funny photo that they were sharing, right? And so that's how they're communicating. If you can't beat them, join them. And that's the approach I've taken.
I love that. So at this point, we've talked about spirituality, relationships, health and wellness, and time and energy management, and how they all blend together. The last thing that I know most people hate to talk about is money.
Yeah, well, this one is a good one.
They don't want to talk about personal or business finance. You just don't want to talk about it.
I've learned a lot from you in this area. I think like the big thing that you taught me was like how frequently you maintain your net worth statements. You got to talk about that because that changed my personally, that changed how I treat my own finances and my own financial trajectory many years ago by adopting this practice that you have.
If you think about it, how most people treat their finances is that most people are very reactive around money, and they look at their finances twice a year. Once is when they're filing their tax returns, and then the other time is if they are applying for a loan, right? So if you're applying for an automobile loan or a home loan or anything like that, you are forced by some external requirement, and that's either the government or a bank, to look at your money. And you're forced to look at and reconcile your bank statements. You're forced to create a personal financial statement, which is either from the bank or you're filing your tax returns. And so I look at that and I'm like, man.
And it's overwhelming when you only do it once a year.
That's the problem. That's the problem, is that if you wait, you're going to have stacks of paper and junk everywhere, and it's stressful, and it just creates a horrible situation, a horrible mood. And you know what it also does is it creates a realization in yourself that, man, I have wasted so much time and money and energy this year where I could have been doing different things with this money, and it could have grown a lot. And so what I do is I have a weekly financial practice, and on my calendar, it is blocked from 9 a.m. until noon every Friday. I do not take client calls. I do not have meetings. I don't do anything from 9 to noon on Fridays. All I'm doing is focusing on finances. I'll just share very briefly the technologies I use and how I use this. One is because I've always owned a business, always since I was out of college. I've always owned my own business. I have always used QuickBooks for my business financials. Well, because I know that technology, I also use it for my personal financials. Yeah. It's not necessarily what I recommend, just because really I use QuickBooks Online, is really designed and more focused for business. But I also treat my personal financials like it is a business. Every single morning, I go into my personal financials on QuickBooks on my phone, and I download all transactions, and I will categorize them throughout the day or throughout the week. Then what happens is on Friday, I go back and I reconcile, make sure that everything is categorized appropriately. I look at the entire financial snapshot of everything, and then I go to my personal financial statement where I have everything categorized and documented as far as assets and liabilities and income. And I make sure that my personal financial statement, which also automatically calculates our net worth, is completely updated by noon on Friday. There's a lot of reasons I do this, but it really comes back to the fundamental philosophy of a messy household creates a messy mind. Messy financials will absolutely create a messy mind. And I know I'm like, a lot of people here they got prickles like sticking up on there, like, oh my God, money. And they're probably stressed out about it because they don't have their financial house in order.
If you have stress about looking at your bank account, that would be a symptom of
that there's a clear indicator.
Yeah.
So, but we treat our house the same. If you show up at our house right now, Chris, there's not a thing out of place, because we do subscribe that A clean household helps clean the mind.
Yeah.
Same thing with our financials. At a given moment's notice, I can tell you exactly where our money is, what our net worth is, and how we're sweeping money to invest in the future. So that's
Gary,
what we do.
For me, so I adopted not to the level of where you're at, but I adopted the same process that you introduced me to of doing just basically a weekly financial review. And so I do mine on Saturdays, and I don't have QuickBooks. I just have a spreadsheet, but it's a personal net worth statement. And the practice of just updating it every week. So it's real simple. I look at how much cash we have, how much investments we have, real estate. Then I look at our liabilities and stuff like that. And I calculate, what is the current net worth? And I update all the stuff. And then at the end of the month, I just tally, here's where we ended the month in each one of these categories of cash, right? Assets, liabilities, so on and so forth. And here's, for me, the unintended outcome of the practice, because it was hard for me to do it I'll be honest, it was like, it's not something I started right away. You probably told me about this in 2013, 2014. I probably didn't start doing it until 2015 because I had lots of fits and starts with it, right? But eventually I got it in place, right? I got it in order and I started doing it. And here is the little thing that changed, that I believe changed for me, our financial situation. I started to link the purchases or where we were spending money to the future outcomes and consequences. And so all of a sudden, you know what? Maybe I'm not going to buy that whatever it was because I'm looking at my financial picture and no, I probably shouldn't spend that $500 right now. I don't need to, right? Can I afford it? Yes. But do I need it? Well, I'd rather see my financial picture go up than down. So I'm not going to spend that $500 this month, right? Or it might go the other way around and say, look, this actually happened not too long ago where we wanted to help our kids. We have 3 kids in marching band. So we wanted to do a little something for the marching band, right? Normally I would be like, nah, I can't do that. That's too much. It's going to cost too much money. But I can look at what the investment was going to be and say, we can afford that. So I can go ahead and contribute that now. So now I have power. Not only is it restrictive, I can actually contribute as well. And it goes both ways. But I found that having that control, because that's really what it is, by having that financial house in order, it gives you control. And that control gives you peace of mind.
Knowing that peace of mind is the key.
Yes.
Man, you just nailed it. I've talked to a good friend of mine, Jim Wahlberg, who we actually interviewed on a different episode here talking about luxury real estate. But Jim and I subscribe to the same thing, and that is experiences, not things. As you look at those financials, Chris, you just nailed it, is that you said it was so easy to make that decision in the experience of supporting the band, right? So you invested in an experience. You didn't buy stuff. It was like what you bought was that experience. You can buy time, you can buy experiences, or you can buy stuff. My wife and I, we don't have a lot of stuff. We don't have the fanciest house or the fanciest cars. Why? After those financial experiences and practices, we look and say, how can we invest our money into experiences for ourselves? How can we go explore this world while our business is taking care of itself because we have these practices in place? But it's not just money. If we don't have all of these practices in place to create some sort of a balance in our life, now, is it always balanced? No. But what these different practices in life, always top of mind, help us create more of a balance so that there's less stress, so that there's more peace of mind. But that peace of mind only comes through that spiritual, the relationship, health and wellness, time and energy management, and personal finance management. It's all of it together that creates that peace of mind.
Well, and here's what's crazy is like, in some ways, these personal routines look like work. And they are work, right? Like it requires will, it requires effort. But when you do the work and you do it consistently, you get that peace of mind. And that peace of mind is so powerful. And here's why. When you have peace of mind because of the work that you're doing, these personal routines, this kind of work that you're doing, all of a sudden you're able to handle a significantly more stress than the next person. It means that you are mentally tough and mentally resilient, and you can deal with more than the average person. That makes you powerful, right? So having that peace of mind can give you that power. It allows you to live a much more stronger life. It allows you to be a much bigger beacon to others on how to live better, on how to have that peace of mind yourself, because people look to you and say, wow, how do they handle all that responsibility and still be a decent person, right? How do they all handle that responsibility and not a jerk all the time? Well, it's because if you have peace of mind, you're able to do it. Now, that doesn't mean that any of us are the final product, because you catch me on a bad day, yeah, I'm a jerk, right? Like, it's going to happen to the best of us.
Yeah.
But it's something we all work. If we work on it, then I'm less of a jerk when times are tough.
That's the path to becoming the peaceful warrior.
Interesting. That sounds almost, what is it? Stoic.
It is. It is absolutely stoic. So
interesting.
Yeah, that was awesome.
If you guys have found any interest or anything that you find valuable, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel. And what I'd love to hear from you is, what are your personal routines that you have in place so that you can have that peace of mind? Drop it in the comments section below, share it, and we look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care.